Welcome to the Advance2000 Revit Collaboration Strategies video. My name is Chris France, and I'll be sharing some topics with you today. First, I'm going to talk about some introductions, a little bit about myself. I'll save the introduction of the company till the end. I'm going to talk about enterprise architecture, specifically applications, data, and infrastructure. Then I'm going to kind of get into the meat of the presentation, where I'm talking about the different ways firms are using Revit collaboration. There's 4 different ways, and we'll get into that. And then I'll wrap it up with some questions. All right. First, I'll introduce myself. My name is Chris France. Currently, I'm the Regional President of Advance2000, affectionately known as a Cloud CIO. And I have my dog in the background, so hopefully he'll be a good boy. But I've been in the IT field, 25 plus years, 11 years as a CIO. I've worked for big companies like IBM, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Little was a large design firm in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I was the CIO for 11 years. I've authored several articles on BIM in the cloud and VDIs and the economics of private cloud computing. This was back in 2010, 2011, and then was a contributing author to Mastering Revit Architecture 2011 and 2013. And so the technology has come a long way since then, and that's some of the things I'll be sharing with you today. And I'm also a speaker at various venues and so forth. Get my little picture out of the way. All right. First, what is enterprise architecture? Well, I'm going to assume that you've defined your business goals. I'm talking mostly to CIOs, IT directors, BIM managers. You know what your company needs. You know what your firm needs. And I'm talking about Revit today because this presentation was originally given live at the Southern California Revit User Group in Orange County. And I thought the folks online and would like to see this as well. But ideally, an enterprise architecture, an EA, will run your entire business, so not just Revit. A lot of these strategies and concepts I'm talking about, specifically Revit, which is a 3D building modeling tool, but it could apply to any application. So, Navisworks, it can, and CATIA, it can even apply to other industries. Anything that has a large graphic PC-based application. Every firm, I don't care what industry you're in, has 3 simple technology components to achieve your business goals. You have your applications, your data, and your infrastructure. The applications are the user interface, generally, specifically if I'm talking about Revit, but it's also your captured or purchased knowledge. So it could be data you've written, applications you've written yourself. It could be a computer-to-computer type application, no humans involved. Anything that's dealing with your business logic, either you've written or you purchased it. Your data is the most important piece, in my opinion, of your enterprise architecture. It's the only thing you can't replace. If you lose your data, you can't go to Advance2000 or CDW or Amazon and buy some more of your data. It's gone. If you had pictures of a building that was taken during the construction, you're not going to be able to take those pictures again without the sheathing on and so forth, and the walls on. And so that's gone. You're not going to be able to replace it. So it's very important that you protect it. And the infrastructure is basically all the stuff, all the physical components that run your applications and your data. It houses your logical components, the applications and data, as I said, but it's also your PCs, your MacBooks, your iPads. It's the stuff that you have, certainly that you have in your hands, but it's also things that are sitting in the server rooms or the data centers, like mini computers, mainframes. You've got your smartphone, of course, probably in your pocket or your purse. You've got your circuits, how you connect it. Collaboration matrix that I'm talking about. And it really ties to where your applications are running and where's your data is located. So let me, I'm going to kind of go into detail on all these various quadrants, but basically let me explain it at a high level. The y-axis and the x-axis, I have the applications in the y and data and the X. So when your applications are local, and I mean in your office, let's just say in your physical office, and your data is local, that's kind of what I would call traditional IT. It's local applications, local data, everything is right there in your office. When you still have your applications local, but maybe some of your data is remote, either in a cloud or a remote data center, or maybe you've got multiple offices in your firm. You're trying to pull data from another office. That's one strategy. And then you have a strategy up here in the upper left where your applications are remote, but your data is local. So you have the data is in one location, maybe in one office, but the applications running it are somewhere else. So you're actually running a remote application. And I'll kind of get into that as from a hybrid cloud scenario. And then this is one of the newest strategies available to firms, that is your applications and your data is in a remote location. So there's nothing in your current office. And a lot of firms have all four of these strategies with maybe not really thinking about it. So that was really the point of this talk today, is to get you thinking about these different strategies and figuring out, are you doing it by design, or is it kind of an afterthought? I always say one strategy is better than 4, and one office is cheaper than 20. I have these little maxims. So if you've got to keep up with all these strategies, it's kind of tough as an IT professional and a business owner. Business owners get that. If I've got 20 offices or 5 offices or 3 offices, I've got to have all this infrastructure all over the place. If I have one office, it costs less than 3 or 5 or 10, whatever. Centralize when you can, distribute when you have to. This is how all firms start. Everything's in their one office, and then they start growing. They open offices and they start to distribute, start to spread out. And you also have to look at shared infrastructure costs less than dedicated. It's kind of like a public transportation versus owning your own car. You know, having your own car costs more, but it is more convenient. But public transportation does cost a lot less, maybe a little bit less convenient. Well, what if you can have the best of both worlds? Volume changes everything. It's one thing to have an office of 5 or 10 people, firm size of 10 people. It's quite another to have it at 50 or 100 or 200 or 500. So things changes and your strategies may change as you grow and expand. And as I said, what I'm talking about local is on-premise in your office, and remote is a data center for this talk. All right, first let me talk about the local traditional IT. The type of products that we would deploy, and by the way, I'm speaking from an IT provider, so we execute all 4 of these strategies for all of our various clients. So we know the pros and cons of all of these. The products that we would typically use for a traditional IT implementation, local, is standard Windows laptops, PCs, Macs. Macs would have to use either Parallels or a Windows emulator to run Revit kind of thing when you're running local. Of course, they got the Bluebeam, Adobe, Revit Building Suite, all the software you need, analysis software if that's what you're using. Your file servers local, and so all these plotters and networks and switches. So all these are physical assets. So back to your enterprise architecture, you have your applications, your data, and your infrastructure all local. All right. And what are some of the pros and cons of that? Well, this is exactly how Autodesk developed developed Revit to be run. It's well supported. They understand it. It's designed for a high performance, PC with graphics card on a local area network sitting right next to the server. That's the way this was designed. You can use standalone or network licenses, although I think standalone licenses are kind of getting phased out by Autodesk with their subscription model. The data server is on the LAN for fast access. It's easy to set up, low cost IT support. You don't need I would say special certifications or anything like that to do that in IT, and it's great for one office location. Real-time collaboration in Revit. When you create a central file and you have work sharing, or you're designing in real time with multiple architects or designers in the model. The save to central are generally fast. They're right in the same office. They're at LAN speeds. So that's the pros. Some of the cons. Well, the performance suffers if you take your laptop. This goes back to the infrastructure housing your applications. If you have a PC sitting in the office, that's a good thing. You can't take it out as easily. But if you have a laptop, you're mobile, and you start to separate your applications from your data, you really don't have any mobility. So then you're in like some kind of a VPN connection so that you can pretend that you're in the office and you're trying to pull your files, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. The local file can be lost on your laptop. I've had people that have left their laptops in a car in the summer, hot, melted. I personally have had my laptop stolen off of an airport, belt through the security. And so, if you've got a lot of important data with no backups, that could be a con. It's kind of unusable, this situation, if you have multiple office pulling data over the wire. So you're trying to go local, and you have multiple local sites. And outside consultants, they're not on your, they're not sitting in your office generally, so they've got to somehow email the models to you or FTP them, and that could be problematic or get corrupted depending on how big they are. And so, like I said, one office cheaper than three. When you have multiple offices, you have to have multiple servers housing all this data. You have to have multiple backups, and you have to have multiple IT people keeping up with all these various locations. And like anything with running a local technology, you must refresh your PCs and servers every 2 to 5 years. You need more memory, you need more, CPU, GPU, whatever. So the next one is when your applications are local, but your data is remote. So now we're starting to look at what I would call a cloud file system. And some of the products that, so you might have, say you have 3 offices, you have your PCs in each office, your Revit is actually running locally, your application, but your data, you want to be able to share your data between your 3 offices. Well, then you start looking at some kind of an internet-based file system or cloud storage. And some of the products that we've deployed to do this are Panzura, Nansuni, Revit Server, C4R, which is basically a Revit server in the cloud, A360, BIM 360, Buzzsaw, ProjectWise, Clarity, Imagine, and AWS Azure. So you see there's some different competing technologies down here in the data remote local quadrant. And they all have their pros and cons. So what are some of those? So this is your kind of your file system that's sitting in a central location, some cloud or data center, and you're trying to distribute it, move it a little bit more efficiently. Well, the pros of this approach is that Revit is still on your local PC, the way Autodesk designed it. You can use your existing PC hardware. You can use your standalone or network licenses. You've got pretty good performance when you have a caching appliance on the same LAN, like a Panzura, Riverbed, Nansuni. And the A360 works for this strategy as well if all the dependencies are met, bandwidth and application model types and all that. And I would say it's minimal change to the end users. It looks like a file server. If you didn't tell your end users that you've moved the file system to the cloud or data center, they wouldn't know generally. And it's a good solution for international offices when you have maybe high latency and bandwidth concerns, bandwidth costs. Some of the cons are limited mobility. You must have this data caching everywhere you go. Now I know as I'm doing this, Panzura doesn't have a mobile solution. They may be working on it. Riverbed started with an office solution and moved to mobile, but it's sometimes it's a limitation. You have to still go into the office to be able to get to your files. You lose file locks on some of the I would call it data movement technologies. Panzura and Nansuni, I'm hearing those are pretty good at maintaining the locks, meaning if you have an office in LA and New York and somebody opens up a model in New York, it's particularly an AutoCAD file, it's locked to them. You can't get in and edit it. Outside consultants, they still have to be on your domain to access your cache devices. And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes you don't want consultants on your domain. It's what I call a high trust environment. Generally, and this is not so much with the Panzuras and the Nansuni, you can still use the Windows access controls for that. But the high trust environment of, say, C4R or A360, it's like you have access to your project, everybody can change everything, and that may or may not be what you want. It's generally we've seen poor performance and high costs using cloud storage of the big boys, Amazon, Azure, and Google. Moving things in and out, and depending on what data center and your bandwidth, it could be slow as well. Multiple offices require multiple caching devices and IT labor. So that goes back to your infrastructure. If you have a distributed environment and you distribute your data and you distributed your apps, then you have to distribute your caching devices. Same thing, you're still buying hardware. It's like you got to refresh not only your PCs and the servers every few years, but you have to refresh your caching devices too, your Panzuras and Nisunis, whatever. All right, so that's the data remote. Now let's go up to this hybrid cloud strategy, where your applications are remote, but your data is local. You know, this doesn't happen a whole lot, but it's possible, especially when you have multiple office firms. You got the Panzura, the Nisunis, the Riverbed, although most of our clients are decommissioning their Riverbeds in lieu of some other technologies now. VPN, file copy, Dropbox, even Dassault's got some stuff going on in here. So you've got your cloud storage or your stuff locally, but you're trying to get to it from a remote applications with local data. So this is what I'd call a hybrid cloud. What are some of the pros and cons of this? Well, Autodesk now supports virtual desktops. So most of the time over here, let me just show you this real quick. You might have virtual desktops, VDIs, running over here, but you still may have some data that's not in the cloud where your VDIs are. It's down in your local office. So you got to pull things down. So it's kind of the reverse of your office. And the good thing is Autodesk now does support virtual desktops, VMware, Citrix, RDS, but they only will allow you to use network subscriptions, no more standalone licenses. The data server is in the office, so that doesn't need to be replaced. And it's a great way to dip your toe in the cloud desktop waters. So if you want to just see what this, how would I actually run a remote app? What would it perform like on Revit, Navisworks, whatever? It gives the workers some mobility. And if it's a cloud service, meaning that you don't own the hardware, then you don't have to pay for PCs every 2 to 3 years. You just have a cheap laptop, tablet, whatever you need to access. And I'll show you at the end. I'll show you what I'm running here. I'm actually running on a Linux laptop, a Lenovo laptop running Linux. And I'll just quickly log into one of our cloud desktops and show you what I'm talking about. Some of the cons of this strategy is your performance suffers unless you have a data caching device. So the same reason that, if you have your PC in one office and you're trying to grab data from your remote office, now you have your PC in the remote office and you're trying to grab data from your local office. You've got to have some kind of a caching device or it'll be slow accessing it. Same thing, outside consultants, if you want to collaborate with your extended team, it's hard to get them into your domain if you don't want to open up your security for that. And the current caching technology, now this could be changed. So you got to verify, when you watch this video, what the current state of the technology is. It currently isn't multi-tenant, so I'll use Panzura. We're the most familiar with Panzura. It's basically one Panzura implementation for each client. You can't have a big Panzura device and be able to run multiple domains from multiple clients on it. It just doesn't exist right now. Multiple offices still require multiple servers, caching, backup, IT labor, and you must refresh the caching servers every 2 to 5 years. So you basically move the problem. So instead of having to replace the caching servers in your local office, you're having to replace them in the remote office. So it's getting there. This hybrid cloud strategy is what we've seen with our clients is they use it as a transition type of technology. So I have Panzura in place. I want to start doing more cloud or VDIs. I can't change everybody overnight, so I'll have, in the interim, I'll have my VDI, cloud folks accessing the local data, and over time, as I put more and more users into the cloud, then I'll have less and less need of having my data remote. And then finally, the last strategy, which is the newest, I would say probably within the last 3 or 4 years, it's really caught on in the AEC industry. We've been doing this probably for the last 7 or 8 years, but just because it solves a lot of problems. So this is where you basically say, all right, I'm going to have in this big yellow area, I'm going to have everything running, my whole project running in a data center. So the only thing I have locally, I have this little icon, Horizon View. I call it, it's either Horizon, it's called Horizon Client right now. It used to be called the View Client. People get confused as to what is it, a View or I think they changed the name in version 6. So now it's Horizon. We're on like 7 or 8. So you basically have, like I said, bring your own device, any kind of local computer. It could be your old hardware, your old Revit workstations. As long as they still run, you can use them to access a cloud desktop. You install the Horizon application or Citrix, whatever. In this case, we're using Horizon. They've got Linux implementations, MacBook, iPads, iPhones, Androids, pretty much any client. They'll let you install it and you can run, your remote applications. And of course, you've got to have any physical printers or plotters locally. So you've got our current implementation is VMware. We have, virtualized hardware, virtualized application, virtualized cloud storage, and the various products that we use, VMware, Citrix, NVIDIA for the graphics card. There's also service providers doing this. Of course, Advance2000 is one of them. Amazon, Windows 7 and Windows 10, they're starting to become viable. If some of these RDS starts to work a little better. There's even companies out there that are hosting VDIs. And I've always said, if you want to move to the cloud, then let's move to the cloud. Why move part of your data? If you see the benefits of moving some of your infrastructure to the cloud, why not move it all? And I write here, Revit and HTML5. I don't think that'll ever happen. But we wouldn't have to use these fancy PC-based remote control technology like VMware and Citrix if the applications weren't written for a PC. If they were written, as in a browser-based, HTML5, then we can just run things out of a browser. But that's not the state of things right now, and it is what it is. We'll deal with it. And so, what are the pros and cons of operating with this strategy? You can see some of the images here. I've got this is an iPad, and this is the Horizon client I was telling you about. This is my iPhone with the Horizon client, and this is my Linux laptop with the Horizon client right there. So you can see it's similar, and I'm launching a Windows Revit desktop right there. So the pros of this is now I can run Revit on a remote virtual PC. I can use any device locally. Whatever, you don't have to get into arguments anymore. Surfaces or MacBooks or whatever the principals of the firm want, they can let their employees have. Network subscription license only, and that's a good thing. It's possible to duplicate your local office in the data center. What do I mean by that? So basically, we're building a local area network just the way Autodesk designed the product to run, but it's in a data center instead of in your office. And you're just getting to this local area network remotely. This allows for real-time Revit collaboration from any location. So your saved essentials are instantaneous. And it doesn't matter whether you have somebody in LA, Dallas, or New York. Everybody can work like they were sitting in the same room with this type of solution. And it's a good solution for multiple firms working with their consultants. So you can carve out a security pool, a file system, so that the consultants only are allowed to see the files, the projects that they're authorized to work on. So they can remote, if you're in Dallas and you're remoting into a cloud, say in New York, then there's no reason why your consultants in Ohio can't log into the data center from remotely as well. And you can put them with tight security. You can encrypt your data if you want. You can have say you're the architect, you can have the architect's directory, and you have read-write to your directory, but the engineering consultants that you have, they only have read-only to your directory. So they can't change your file, but they can link to it and read it, and vice versa. The engineers can have read-write to their directories, and you, the architect, can only read-only or link to it. You can run all apps. If you deploy a full Windows desktop in the cloud, you can run all your apps, not just Revit. So whether you're running, Navisworks or CATIA or Bluebeam or anything like that, anything that you need to run your project, Nuforma, it could be there. And generally, the cloud has very flexible and scalable type infrastructure. You can go up and down based on your project needs. Some of the cons, well, if implemented with multiple clouds, you now have multiple clouds rather than multiple offices. So you've moved a problem. So a lot of our clients, they buy into the Amazon cloud for certain things. They buy into the Microsoft cloud. They buy into the Autodesk cloud. They buy into Advance2000 cloud. They maybe even have some SolidWorks where they buy into the Dassault cloud. And so instead of having 5 offices, physical offices, they have 5 clouds that they have to move data between and share. And so you got to be careful about that. I tell people that we've got a cloud consolidation consulting practice, because if you can run everything out of one office, you're going to save money and it's going to have less complexity. Same thing, if you can run everything out of one cloud, you're going to save money and have less complexity and keep that data from moving all over the place. You won't own 80% or more of your IT infrastructure anymore. You know, to some firms that's a pro. To the IT guys, it's a con. They look at that as losing some of the control and capabilities that they have. But in actuality, you can actually get more capabilities and control the cloud resources. Do it yourself is very complex, and you need virtualization engineers. So remember how I said when you stand up a local office with a PC and some PCs and a server, you don't need some high certified IT people. Well, when you're getting into cloud and virtualization, you do. And these folks are in high demand, so you know what supply and demand does. And so they're hard to attract, they're hard to train, and they're hard to keep. So do it yourself in this environment gets to be very difficult. Parts of the world, another con, parts of the world can't work from a single data center. So as much as you'd like the Pacific Rim, you know, China, Singapore, the Middle East, to be able to work out of a single data center, it ain't going to happen. The latencies are too high. The local telecom companies are, you know, oversubscribing in different parts of the world. You can't get good jitter and all that. But like I said earlier, you know, centralize when you can, distribute it, you know, when you have to. If you can get, you know, 90% of your project in one data center and only 10% is outside of it, then great, you're making progress rather than having, you know, 100% of it all spread out. And it's costly if you still buy expensive local PCs and only want one Revit desktop. So basically, if you still have, you know, say you want to run Revit in the cloud, but you want to run some of your other applications locally, like, you know, maybe Lumion or things like that, then you're kind of duplicating your infrastructure. You've got PC infrastructure locally, and you've got PC infrastructure in the cloud, you know, suitable to run Revit. So you kind of want to say, let's figure out how, you know, if you could run everything out of the cloud, that would be ideal. And the next question is, people ask me, what are some of the costs of doing this fourth strategy of having your applications remote and your data remote? Well, you know, any CIO knows this, but 80% of your costs are infrastructure. It's kind of like the iceberg. Most end users, they don't see what all's involved to get their Revit running. You know, their servers and their PCs and all that. The hardware, the circuits, the bandwidth, the IT staff, you know, just everything is kind of hidden behind the scenes. But the CFO or the firm principals see it because the costs, you know, bubble up to them. So a lot of times firms make applications and data decisions without seeing the big picture. My take is, you know, optimize your infrastructure, because that's where 80% of your cost is, and then choose your application and your data strategy around that. And I would say the number one and number two costs of the IT budget are IT labor and desktop resources. So you want to maximize both of those, because the desktop resources, you need to, you know, constantly refresh those. Servers, they age out, but not as fast as desktops. And the IT labor, you know, you got to have somebody to keep all this stuff running, and the more you distributed you are, the more IT people you need to have distributed. And so in general, you know, you have to actually put together a detailed cost list to find out exactly how much it would cost your firm. But in general, what I've seen is for like the small firms, I would say in the 3 to 10 person firm, the local spending, that's typically how most firms are doing that now. It's about the same as remote. Local firms, you don't want to get into that mixed hybrid strategy or having your data one place in your application. It's just too complex and too costly. But, you know, I had one client tell me that, look, they said, I'm spending the same amount of money as I was spending having everything locally, but with the cloud, I have the same amount of cost every year, but I have a lot more capabilities, better disaster recovery, better access to, you know, remote support and so forth. And then I got the mobility. I can go anywhere and work. Now, the larger firms, I would say if you've got more than 10 people or you have multiple offices, The remote will save you the most money. I've seen anywhere from 20 to 40% per year of your IT budget, and you get better IT, better DR, and more, basically more IT for your money. Because that's kind of what I tell firm principals. You know, you've got 5 offices, say, or 3 offices. You've got all this infrastructure spread out all over the place, which is 80% of your costs. If you can consolidate your infrastructure, reduce that, and then leverage some economies of scale, then you're going to save some money. And I always tell firms it's better to avoid the spend than to consolidate after the fact. Now, obviously, if you're a 100-person firm and you've already got 3 offices and you've deployed them all locally, then you're running your business. You've got to look at ways to consolidate and save money. But we've got, you know, startups, new firms, people, you know, going off on their own, and they're looking at, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars investment in infrastructure, and they get to avoid that whole spend by putting it all in the cloud from day one, so they don't have to consolidate. So what did we learn today? Well, how do I consider enterprise architecture planning for Revit? I tell people enterprise architecture applies to every firm and every technology, but it's not just for Revit. It's for all your business. So you got to look at all your applications, all your data, and all your infrastructure, and you don't want to have an EA for each one. It's gonna really drive up your cost and complexity. And you say, well, which Revit real-time collaboration strategies are available? Like I said, we've got, you know, local applications local and your data is local. That's your traditional IT. You have your applications local and your data remote. And you have your data's in a remote data center, cloud, internet file system. You have your applications remote, but your data is local. You're starting to get into hybrid cloud type environment, but some of your data hasn't been moved to the cloud and is still local. You need to access. And then the 4th newest strategy is having everything remote. Your applications and your data and your infrastructure, for the most part, are in a private project cloud data center or services. And which one's the best? I said it depends. But leading AEC firms that we come across are implementing project cloud scenarios. It's the most flexible. It gives you the ability to run all your apps, not just Revit. And it kind of reminds me of the migration we did years ago from, you know, 2D AutoCAD to the Revit migration. You know, at the time, what do I mean by that? Well, at the time, say the leading firms would be adopting Revit. They say, hey, I can see there's you know, the parametric design and, you know, schedules, and I can see the benefit, the visualization. And you might have your consultants, they hadn't adopted Revit yet. They're still on AutoCAD. And you said, fine, just send me the AutoCAD files. I'll link them in and, you know, extrude and go from there. After a while, that got to be a pain. And the lead firms will say, hey, look, if you want to continue to work with us, you need to get on Revit so that we can link Revit models and get away from AutoCAD. Make the investment. Same thing's happening with the cloud. Lead firms are adopting the cloud. A few of their consultants are opting to stay outside the cloud, so they're still having to move data between the cloud and their consultants, and they're tolerating that right now. But there'll come a day, and it could be 2018, where the lead firms are saying, hey, look, it's really a pain dealing with you outside the cloud. You need to get in the cloud, period. So it's the same story happening again. And what is the most secure way to work with consultants? By far, a project cloud. I've had some of our clients say, I can't move my project to the cloud. It's not secure. And it's like, well, fine, don't call it a cloud. That's a marketing term. Call it a private data center. Now, you might argue you might not be able to go to a public cloud like Amazon or Microsoft Azure, but there are a lot of data centers, Advance2000 being one of them, where you can, and as long as you can use a third-party data center, you can secure it, have your dedicated resources, lock it down, can even encrypt it. So that's the most, and trying to sync or maintain security across multiple strategies is, quite frankly, a nightmare, and you want to try to avoid that at all costs. And so just a quick introduction, you know, call it a commercial at the end for Advance2000. We serve many industries. AEC is one of the big industries we serve, obviously. That's why I'm talking about it today. But we also do healthcare, education, a lot of state and local government, manufacturing, and I'll call it professional services firm, law, insurance, you know, accountant, CPA, so forth. Technology we own 2 data centers now. It's about a combined 100,000 square feet in the Buffalo, New York area, Western New York. We've been in business over 25 years. I tell people we are an IT company, but we have a cloud. We're not a cloud company. So we have just as many clients that are buying products from us, servers, PCs, storage, and having engineers on site, on premise in your office, as we do clients that are in the cloud in our data centers. And we're a select competitive local exchange carrier. So we're basically a phone company in Buffalo. We help our clients get to our data centers in a cost-effective way over the circuits we provision. We're a full-service firm. Like I said, you don't have to be an IT person to consume our services. You can be, but you don't have to be. A lot of firm owners like us. They say, hey, I have 10 people. I need 10 phones, 10 emails, 10 Revits, maybe 1,000 gigabytes or a terabyte of storage. Set it up. And IT people can do the same thing. We're privately held. We're accountable only to our clients. We're at 9 offices, 200 plus people. And as of today, we've got about 15,000 VDIs we're managing for all of our clients. Got 24/7 by 365 NOC monitoring and support. So that was one thing that our small clients, my smallest client is a 3-person structural engineering firm. And they used to have an outsourced IT consultant that they would call on Monday, and they'd be lucky if they saw him by Wednesday or Thursday. And now they love this 24/7 access. They can call us at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they get a hold of an engineer, and their problems are resolved. No waiting 3 or 4 days. So what are some parting thoughts here? You've got 4 strategies to consider for your enterprise architecture, particularly as it pertains to Revit collaboration. 1 EA strategy is better than 4 if you can do it. If you have more than 1, then it's probably a transition type thing. 1 office is cheaper than 20, whether it's 10 or 5 or whatever. Centralize when you can, distribute when you have to. Shared infrastructure cost less than dedicated. So think about it. I've got all of this PC virtual hardware, virtual server hardware in the data center. We buy in bulk. So we buy, hundreds of terabytes of storage and, gobs of memory and so forth. So we can drive that cost down and pass it off to our clients, the savings. And I tell people, technology is not an investment. It's not an asset. It's a depreciating asset. Would you buy a house for $200,000 knowing that in 5 years you can sell it for $20,000? Most people would not. So you really want to drive the cost of your technology down because it's disposable. You buy it and it depreciates. And so you don't want to be owning that if at all possible. Volume changes everything. The bigger you get, the more distributed you get, your strategies and your costs are going to change. PC utilization is 15%, VDI utilization is 80%. That's a good round numbers to remember. Your PC sitting in your office, you're lucky if they are utilized 15% of the time out of a 24-hour day. Your staff is in meetings, they travel, they're at job sites, they're at home, they're sleeping. All that hardware, all that expensive hardware is sitting idle. If you ran your firm at a 15% utilization, you'd be out of business. So we said there's a better way. What if we pushed all that PC hardware that's running Revit and other applications into a centralized data center, and then you drive up the utilization. So if you're not using your virtual resources, somebody else can use them. So we can get the utilization up to 80% and drives the cost down and saves money. And like I said, infrastructure is 80% of your cost. Optimize that first and then reduce your expenses. All right, concludes the presentation. I'll give you a little live demo. This is where people would ask me if I was in the live audience. They would ask me questions, but you're not live. So there's my email. There's my phone number. If you have questions, just contact me, and I'll be certain to answer them. All right. I just wanted to kind of show you a little bit about what I'm doing here. I got a speed test up here. So this is my Linux laptop, and you can see I've got my application bar on the left here, and I want to get the show you my speed test here. So this is what I just did. So I'm in my home office, and I've got Time Warner Cable now Spectrum, and I had 140 down and almost 12 up, which is good. I've only contracted for 100 down, 10 meg up service. Let's see if what it does again here. And now it may be a little less because I'm actually recording. But you saw what it was before. Keep going, keep going. And so with the cloud, we say, you know, we only ask for about 1.5 to 2 megs of bandwidth per user. So most broadband connections at home are plenty, and you just have to size it appropriately for your office. All right, so that's my local bandwidth. Okay, now my cloud. This is my VMware Horizon client. I'm going to log into already logged into it, so I have a remote desktop up, and you can tell by the bar up here. I've got speed test here. Look, I just ran. I won't run it again. Well, I'll run it in the background, but I'm connecting on a remote desktop, which actually is running in Buffalo, New York, in our data centers, and it's connected to the internet from our data centers. And I got, you know, see 276 down, 343 up, and I'll run it again here and see what I get. I've also got Revit running, you know, so get different. Let's see. Can rotate it here. So this is, I'm actually physically in Binghamton, New York, which is about 3 hours outside of New York City. And I've also got a license of, CATIA. And this is my X-Wing fighter. And so, you know, it doesn't matter. If it's running on your PCs, it can run in the cloud. And let me just move these down, and you see that's about the same, 316, 264. So that's basically how it is. And so my file system, so my back to that enterprise architecture, my applications, my Revit, my CATIA are remote. My infrastructure is remote. All this servers and everything is sitting in the data center, and I can create a you know, local area network data center, and right from the same, you know, data center and so forth. So that's what it looks like. Everything is remote, and the only thing I have is locally is my laptop. And I could be traveling in LA, visiting clients, doesn't matter. Thank you for watching today.